Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today I decided to bring this video where I'm going to be teaching you guys how to use the React table library in order to create really simple tables in a React application. So React table is a very famous library. It allows you to do a lot of very complicated stuff related to tables in a very simple way. So for that reason, I wanted to introduce this video. We're going to be building this very simple example app over here. The CSS doesn't matter. I know it looks kind of cool in my opinion, but I won't be showing you guys how to write this CSS because it isn't the point of the video. However, we're just going to be building a simple table like this where you can generate, put a bunch of items, have columns, rows, whatever you want, headers for each column, that kind of stuff. And we're going to be doing this entirely using the React table library. Also, the data we're putting over here, obviously in your case, you can use any kind of data. The data we're using is actually a fake data that I got from a website. I'm going to leave the link in the description if you want to use the same data as an example. Together with all of the code I'm going to be writing in this video, you can just check it out in the description. So this is basically what we're going to be building. Before we get into the video, if you could leave a like, I would massively appreciate it. So with that in mind, let's get into the video. Okay everyone, so let's start the tutorial. I have a very simple application already set up over here. It's basically nothing. All it has is an app.js, an app.css, an index.js, and I also have that data that I put in the description. It's just a JSON file with a bunch of like people's names and information. Again, if you want to download this, you can download it in the description or just use the data that you are planning to use in your project. So all I've done in this project so far is I just imported the fake data over here at the top, and that's basically it. You'll see we do have the CSS. This is our app over here. We do have the CSS because I already put the CSS, like I said before, and we're going to be adding like class names and stuff attributed to this CSS. However, it's basically starting from scratch. So the first thing we want to do is we want to install the library React table. So I'm going to open over here another terminal, and I'm going to say yarn add React table, just like this. If you're using npm, it's just npm install React table. So it finished installing. I'm also already running the app, as you can see over here. So you should probably start running yours too. So what I want to do is, first of all, I want to see if I can just look at this data over here, this fake data, right? So some way I can do this is I can just console log the fake data just so we can analyze it a little bit. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to open up our console log, and you'll see that it is an array with 500 elements, right? It's divided in a certain way where, as you can see, we have an ID, we have a first name, we have a gender, and we have a last name, email, and university. Those are the pieces of information that I want. So those will be the columns of our table. And to set this up, we have to first import something from the React table library. So I'm going to say import from React table, just like this, React table. And I'm going to import a hook called use table. So this is a very cool hook because it will basically control the entirety of our table using React table. And this hook is basically set up as follows. You need to pass to it two pieces of information. The first piece of information you want to pass is basically a list of columns you want to have in your app. And the second one is the data that you want to fill up inside of your table. So we're going to first set up the data. We're going to say data is equal to, and we can just set it equal to fake data, but as per the documentation in React table, they recommend using, they recommend memoizing both the data and the columns you get. So we'll just follow what the documentation recommends. To memorize, you can just say use memo. You don't have to say react.useMemo. You can just import useMemo over here as well. And then we're just going to return from this function the fake data. And we're going to put an empty dependency array over here because it doesn't depend on anything. It's just the fake data that is returning. So this is the data that we're getting. Then we also need to define the columns. The columns will be a little bit harder than the data because the data we already have it done. If you were fetching data from an API or something like this, here's where you would do this. But since we already have, it's just a file, it's way simpler. But for the columns, all we do is we just define this variable called columns. We set it equal to react.useMemo, like we've done before. And this will return an array because the columns are actually in a format of an array. So how exactly would the column of our table look like? Well, in React table, you define a column as something that has a header, just like this. And the header is basically what you write. Oh, I don't have the example running over here, but it's just the text that actually appears in the table when you render it. And it will be, for example, if I'm rendering the ID column, I can write it either like this, or I can write identifier. You know, it doesn't have to be exactly like the data looks like, because if you look at the data, ID obviously looks like this, right? But if you want to put a different name, you can just set it up over here. In our case, I'm just gonna write ID just like this, and then to explain how, like, which specific part of the data we're gonna get for this column, you have to put exactly what is over here, right? Exactly how it looks in the data. And this is called the accessor. So the accessor has to look exactly how it looks in the data. So just to make sure, the header is for labeling purposes, the accessor is for getting the data. And this is how a column would look like. So we're gonna have a couple columns in our project. So I'm gonna set up one for the ID, one for the first name, one for the, do we have a last name? Yeah, we do have a last name. One for the email, and one for the university. No, we also have gender. So we have a bunch, right? It's giving me errors over here because I didn't put commas. So we have to put a comma between all of them and then save it. And we have to change the name for each of them. So I'm going to do the first one over here. I'm going to put first name. And the accessor is how it looks over here. So it has to look like this. And I'm going to cut, since I'm going to do all of them and be back in a second. Okay, as you can see, I finished setting up all of them. And they look exactly like I said they would look. So this is pretty much it for setting up our columns. It's not that complicated. And now we are able to use the useTable hook. Now the useTable hook is really cool because what it does is it takes in these two things, which is the column and the data. So I'm going to say use table. Then you have to pass in an object with both a column and with the data. And then it gives you back this thing, which basically all it is a bunch of functions that you can use to define your table. So you can either set it equal to an object like this or a variable like this, or you can directly destructure them over here. So this will return a bunch of functions. So you can grab those functions by destructuring them through this object. So what is an example of a function that it might give us? Well, the get table props is one of them. There's also the get table body props. There's the header groups. There's the rows. And there's the prepare row function. Now, you might be looking at this and you might be thinking, okay, what does this mean? What are all these functions supposed to do? Well, they are the primary and fundamental functions that you have to use in order to set up your table in React table. Now, after I write them, I'm going to go back and explain to you guys exactly what each of them mean, because they are a little bit confusing in the beginning. The syntax for React table, in my opinion, used to be way simpler before, especially because they used to provide components already directly made for you. However, the library decided to change their approach in order to make it more versatile and allow people to customize their tables in a much personal way. So now it may look a little bit more complicated when you set this up. However, in the long run, it is extremely important because you will be able to customize your tables to whatever you want, and you will get used to the syntax really quickly. So don't be scared if you get confused by the syntax I'm about to write right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a div which is going to contain the table. And since I am using CSS, I'm just going to put the CSS class name that I used in my CSS file. Then over here, we have to obviously set up a table. Now, a table is just a table element like this. And in order to describe your table, you have to have two parts of it. You have to have a t-head, which is the head of the table. And you have to have a t-body, which is the body of the table, right? So for the t-head, which is what we're going to be working through first, we have to set up the headers of our, or the columns of our table. Now, you see over here, we have this thing called header groups, and this will be extremely important to make this work. We also have this thing called table props, and this is actually just props that might exist inside of your table. Like I said, I'm going to explain to them after I'm finished writing the code, just because it will make it simpler for you guys to understand when the code is already written. However, to use this get table props, you just destructure it like this. You say 3 dots and then get table, just get table props, and it's just a function, and this should work like this. Now for the t-head, what we do is we loop through the header groups, because header groups is actually an array, and we loop through each of them by saying header groups.map, and we're going to grab each header group just like this, and for each header group we're actually going to return back a tr, which is a tag that exists in HTML. You might be used to it. It's common in every table. Then for each tr, we want to destructure the header group props for that specific header group. So we're going to say 3 dots header group dot get header group props. You might be seeing a pattern, right? We're putting props to each element specifically depending on where they are in our table. Then inside of our tr, we obviously have to loop through every single header. So we're going to say header groups, or header group dot headers dot map, and this is where we're going to get each specific column. So each specific column that we need in our app. Then inside of here, I'm actually not going to use curly braces, I'm going to use parentheses again. So inside of here, this is where we return our th, which is another tag in HTML. And similar to what we've been doing so far, we have to destructure the header props for this specific column. So we're going to grab the column and say get header props, just like this. Now over here, we're just going to display the header for that specific column. So we're going to say column dot render and then header. Okay, this is probably super confusing for you guys, and it's fine because this is just how the syntax looks, and I'll explain to you guys right now a little bit of what we wrote. So first of all, the get table props. This method just is an object. It returns an object of props that can be spread out into a table element, and it can include like a bunch of attributes that you might have in a table, such as like class name, style, ID, anything that you might want to apply to your table element. And you have to do this just in case you add those attributes. And when you add those attributes, they will be displayed over here. Make sure whenever you put, when you destructure stuff like this, props like this, like we're doing, you make them the last prop that you add. So I could technically come over here and add a prop, I don't know, an ID or whatever I want to put as a prop, but this has to be the last one, right? So then what we did is we looped through header groups. But what exactly is header groups? Well, this is an array of objects that represents the header groups of each table, which might sound a little bit redundant, but it basically just corresponds to each object containing or corresponding to a specific header group that contains information about the columns in that group, such as like their table, their labels, or maybe like how they are sorted, right? So you're just grouping all of your headers, and by headers, you know what I mean, like this kind of stuff. And you're looping through each of them to then display your TR, right? And your TR, like always, you'll have to get the props, because in case you have props, you would have to destructure them like this. So we do this for the TR, and then we loop through each header group, we grab the headers, and now we have access to the columns. Then obviously we have to display the th, which is the table header, and then we destructure the props again, like we've been doing so far. And in the React table library, you have this thing called render, and you can specify what you want to render from that specific column. So if we were to, I don't think I can see anything right now, right? But I'll show you guys what this does after we have a table, because I'll manipulate this a little bit so you guys can get a clearer idea. But for now, all we're doing here is when we say column.render header, we're just telling it to display whatever each column has on this value over here, the value with the key called header. So Now we have basically the columns and t head of our table done. And I know it seems like a lot, but don't worry. Like I said, it will become easier as it comes. Now we have to do something that is going to be very similar on the t body, but it will display the body of the table. So what we have to do is we have to, first of all, destructure the body props. And we do have a table. So you might be getting used to this because of what we did with the t head, but we just destructured the table body props. Then we come over here and we actually got something called rows from the use table hook, and rows is just the rows of the table. So I'm going to say rows.map, and we're going to grab each specific row just like this. Now we do have to return it like this with a curly brace, because before we render our row, we do have to do something called prepare row, just like this, prepare row. And I'll explain in a second, like I said, what prepare row does. But after we prepare the row, we can return the row as a UI, just like this. And what we're going to return is a tr, right, a table row. And over here, in each tr, you do have to get the props. So how do we get the props? Well, you just say row.get row props, just like this. Then inside of here, we have to get each row, look for their cells, and loop through each of them to get their specific cells. And for each cell, we're just going to return, right? Or we don't even have to return it like this. We can just return it with some parentheses, right? So for each cell, what we return is a TD, just like this. And in each TD, we do have to get some props. Now, what is it called here? It's cell dot get cell props. And instead of the TD, this is where we render the cell. So we say cell dot render cell, just like this. And this is basically it, actually. I believe it should actually be displaying everything or not. Let's check it out. Is it displaying? It's not displaying. Let me check out why. There's some errors. Oh, I figured out the error. I accidentally forgot to put a dependency list for the columns. So if you want to do that, you just come over here and you put an empty array over here. And yeah, now you can see our table is being beautifully displayed. Which now, looking at it, I think if I hadn't even put anything for our t-body, it would have shown something. Yeah, I could have just shown you guys this before. But if you don't put anything for the body, you do get the table headers just like this, like I said before. So this is how we're displaying the header. But if we want to display the body, this is exactly how we would do this. And you can see all of our body is being displayed. Now, again, all the CSS to make this look cool, to make this look scrollable and not display everything at once, it's all just CSS. It has nothing to do with React table. But I'll explain to you guys right now what all of these functions and syntax over here actually means. So for the get table body props, it's just like before. You're just getting the props like we've done a bunch of times in the table header as well. Now the coolest one over here, that the most different, I think, is the prepare row function. So this method is used to prepare a row for basically just rendering. It is called in each row. So whenever you loop through the rows array, it will be called for each row that you're rendering, and it basically just takes the row as an argument. It can be used to perform any necessary calculations on like how to format the row before it is actually rendered. So you might not actually need this as a beginner if you're not making any super complicated stuff, but it is a necessary step in the React table library syntax to actually render your rows in your table. Then most of what comes after this is just similar to what we've been doing so far. You just get the props, then you get the row, and then for each row you do have a cell, and a cell is just you know what I mean, like a specific cell, because you're kind of getting, when you say row.cells, you get the list of cells in each row, right? You get all of the cells over here. This is a row. This rectangle over here is a row, and each cell specifically, you get them, you map through them, and then when you say cell.render cell, obviously this over here is part of the cell object, which we didn't create. It's just part of how the library works. And this value over here is basically the text that you're putting inside of your cell. this is what it's rendering. So this is basically it for creating a simple table using React Table. Now, what you might be thinking is, why did I have to do all of this? It seems way simpler to just maybe even handle this on your own or use a pre-made component. Well, let me go through it by steps. Well, creating this on your own, yeah, it might be simple for a beginner table, for a simple table, but as you scale your tables up, or as you have to add more and more complicated functionalities to your table, it will become harder, and having a library such as this one will come very handy. Now, using a pre-made component, well, yeah, that could be cool if you're making a project that will need a table that basically won't be customizable at all, then yeah, it's fine. But you won't be able to make a lot of changes to match whatever you want, and being able to use the flexibility of this library is really cool, especially because it's one of the most common libraries out there. Also, there are a lot of benefits specific to React Table. The main one, in my opinion, is performance, because React Table is built with performance in mind. So it basically just uses a virtualized rendering system that will only render the rows that are currently visible in the viewport, which makes it very fast when dealing with a large number of rows, which is really cool, and it will make your project just way scalable. I've talked about virtualizing lists before, so this is something that I think is really cool. Not to mention, like I said, it's highly customizable. It also has built-in features that I didn't include in this video because I just wanted to show the basics. But if you're going to want to see a little bit more of an advanced tutorial on this, you can actually do a lot of sorting, filtering, pagination, all the kind of stuff with this library. And that's what it differentiates, because it might be a little bit complicated as a simple table, but as you scale it up, it will make your life way more easier. And finally, it is a very small library, to be honest. Like you can see over here, it's like for whatever it does, it doesn't take a lot of space. It doesn't increase your bundle size by that much. It is known to have a very small footprint, and this is important because usually tables are used in applications, like big tables are used in applications that are already big. So you don't want to add a library that is going to increase the bundle size a lot when your application is already big. So yeah, those are the positives of this library. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. Subscribe because I'm posting twice a week, and I would massively appreciate it. And yeah, that's basically it. Really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.